Dear student, good morning and namaste. Welcome to this educational program of Join School Family, Rupandei. It is a virtual class developed by Join School Family, and it is specially designed for the student of class 9 and 10. I am your English teacher. I am going to teach you English in this class. It is a continuation of the previous topic, that is active and passive voice. Today also we are going to learn active and passive voice. In today's class we are going to learn about the structure of active tenses and their passive equivalent. In this table, you can see the structure of active tenses and their passive equivalents. Let's discuss the different structure of active tenses and their passive equivalents from this table. In the first column, you see there are 12 different tenses. In the second column, you'll see the active voice, structure of active voice and example of active voice. And in the third column, you'll see the passive voice, passive structure and examples. Now let's discuss one by one. First, simple present tense. The structure of simple present tense is subject plus V1 or V5 plus object. With the singular subject, you have to use V5. With the plural subject, you have to use V1. Singular subject agree with singular verb and plural subject agree with plural verb. The structure of simple present tense, subject plus V1, V5 plus object. The example is Abik writes a letter. This is the structure and example of simple present tense. Let's see the passive equivalent of simple present tense. We have already discussed in the previous video that the subject of the active voice become object in the passive voice, and the object of the active voice becomes subject in the passive voice. And the passive structure of simple present tense is object. Here object means object of the active voice. After object there is MR, is MR be verb, and after that plus V3, past participle form of the verb, and then by and subject. This is the passive structure of simple present tense. If the active voice is in simple present tense, you have to change in this structure to make it passive voice. Let's see the example. A letter is written by Abik. Abik is the subject in the active voice and it becomes object in the passive voice. A letter is the object in the active voice. In the passive, it becomes subject. So a letter is written by Abik. A letter is the singular subject. Singular subject with singular subject, we use is. And with M, with I, we use M. And with plural subject, we use are. And there is always past participle form of past participle form of the verb in passive voice. Now next, number 2, present continuous tense. The structure of present continuous tense is subject plus is-mr plus before plus object. The example is, Avik is writing a letter. Avik is subject. With Avik is used here because Avik is a singular subject. With singular subject we use is. With I we use am. And with plural subject we use are. Avik subject is be verb and writing before a letter is object. This is the present continuous tense, structure of present continuous tense in active voice. Now equivalent of present continuous tense in passive is object, after object is mr plus being plus v3 plus by plus subject. Example, a letter is being written by Avik. A letter is the object of the active voice. We have used is with singular subject, and being in continuous tense we use being, and third form of the verb, past participle form of the verb, and then by and subject Avik. Okay, the subject of the active voice. In this way, we change active voice of present continuous tense in the passive using this structure. Next, present perfect tense. Present perfect tense, the structure of present perfect tense is subject plus have or has plus V3 plus object. Example is, Avik has written a letter. With singular subject we use has, with plural subject we use have. And then V3, past participle form of the verb, a letter is object. They change this present continuous in active voice of present perfect tense, okay, into passive. Okay, the passive equivalent is object, after object has or have, after has or have we use been, and past participle form of the verb V3 plus by and subject. Example is, a letter has been written by Avik. A letter is singular subject, with singular subject we use has, and with plural subject we use have. And after that, been, with perfect tense we use been, and verb in third form, and by and Avik. Avik, the subject of the active voice. The next is present perfect continuous tense. P means a present perfect continuous tense. The structure of present perfect continuous tense is subject plus has or have, plus been plus before plus object. The example is, Avik has been writing a letter. Avik is subject, with singular subject Avik we have used has, and then been and before, writing before, okay, and a letter is object. Okay. And there is no passive form. Okay. There is no passive form of the present perfect continuous tense. And present perfect continuous tense has no passive equivalent. Now next, past, simple past. Simple past. The structure of simple past is subject plus V2 plus object. Example is, Avik wrote a letter. Avik is subject, root V2 and a later is object. Now let's see the simple active the equivalent of simple past active active simple past. Here object after object was where and V3 past participle form and by plus S means subject of the active voice. Example, a letter was written by Abhigak. A letter is the object of the active voice. The object of the active voice becomes subject here, and with singular we use was, and with plural subject we use were. And after that, past participle form of the verb by and subject Abhigak, the subject of the active voice. The subject of the active voice become object in passive voice. Now next tense is past continuous tense. Past continuous tense. The structure of past continuous tense is subject plus was were plus before plus object. Abhik was writing a letter. Abhik is subject, was with singular subject was is used here, and writing before a later object. Now let's how we can change past continuous tense into passive voice. The structure of past continuous tense in passive voice is object after object was were and plus being, which continuous tense we use being. After being V3 past participle form of the verb. After past participle form of the verb we write by and then subject. Now a letter was being written by Abhigak. A letter is the object of the active voice. Here is the subject, and with singular subject we write was, and then being for continuous tense. For continuous tense we use being, and after that there is always past participle form of the verb in passive voice, and by and then subject, we write subject. Now next is past perfect tense. The next tense is past perfect tense. The structure of past perfect tense is subject plus had plus B3 plus object. Abhik had written a letter. Abhik is the subject, had, and then B3 past participle form of the verb, and a letter is object. And how we can change this past perfect tense in passive voice? You can change past perfect tense in passive by using this structure. This structure is object plus had, after as been. With perfect tense we use been plus B3, after B3 by, and then subject of the active voice. The example is a letter had been written by Abhik. A letter is the subject here. Okay. It is the object of the active voice. After the had, whether it is singular or plural subject, we always use had. After had been, and then verb in the third form, past participle form, by, and then subject of the active voice. Here the subject of the active voice become object in the passive voice. And next tense is past perfect continuous tense. Past perfect continuous tense. The structure of past perfect continuous tense is subject plus had. After had we had been, and then before plus object, verb in ing form. The example is Abhik had been writing a letter. Abhik had been writing a letter is the example of past perfect continuous tense. In this way, we write the structure of past perfect continuous tense. And talking about the passive voice, there is no passive form. There is no passive voice of past perfect continuous tense. We can't change past perfect continuous tense into passive voice. In this way, we write the structure of active tenses and their passive equivalent. Okay. About the future tense. Okay. About the future tense, structure of active tenses and their passive structure of future tense we'll discuss. Okay. You will discuss in our next video. Okay. Only this much for this video. Thank you for watching this video.